My name is Matt Bassam. I'm a junior consultant at Turner & Townsend. I'm joined today by Bernie Lazowski, who's a senior consultant from Turner & Townsend. This is a Retrofit information support and expertise event, which is fully funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, which is being delivered by Turner & Townsend. So we're going to have a relatively short presentation today, followed by lots of opportunity for questions or discussion that you might want. The event's going to be an hour. We will be finishing on time. Please do keep your microphones muted and your cameras switched off during the presentation. The slide decks that we'll use today are going to be made available after the event in a follow-up email, so everyone that attends today will get those. There's also going to be a clean recording at the end of this, alongside our other masterclasses and resources that are on the RISE website. It will provide a bunch of links in the chat as we go, and please do make use of that chat function for any questions. There's going to be an opportunity for discussion directly after the presentation, but if you pop them in as we go, we can see them and have a read. Finally, we're going to have a quick word poll at the end, a bit of like a feedback. Please do complete it because it helps us to understand the knowledge that we've got of our topics. Thank you all again for joining, and I will now hand over to Bernie to start today's presentation.
Afternoon, everyone. Nice to have you here. And yeah, I'm Bernie, a senior consultant in the housing team, and yeah, we'll be leading this presentation today. So we might as well get started. So yeah, today we'll be looking at data, really, data, stock assessment, and incremental retrofit, but really, you know, how data can help us and its importance in this type of work. So yeah, why is data important? Data principles, governance, and process. What data do I need? Stock assessment, and then incremental retrofit. So, why data is important. So we've got sort of a few key points here. Why data is important. We've got sort of regulation and compliance, identifying cost savings, failures and issues, a lot of all sorts of things really. But I think the key takeaways for me is sort of it's that having an accurate starting point of your assets, and then similarly an accurate information to report on your project from and monitor your project, and as well putting together like a robust project plan, and allowing you to deliver it in a robust manner to, you know, adjust to anything that comes up, whether that is sort of slight change in the properties you're able to deliver, changing costs, essentially giving you better insights into your project and be able to adapt to what comes up during delivery. And as that bottom right one says, it's sort of saving time if used effectively, and allows you to sort of deliver your project in a more effective manner. Yeah, for any retrofit project really, or any project you deliver. Okay, so this kind of builds on that a bit. So what this sort of visual is trying to show is at the most basic level, or the foundation really, your data can cover sort of your mandatory reporting requirements, whether that's sort of compliance for your installs, or any grant money that you're sort of delivering, or just your asset management and stock compliance. So that's your foundation of, you know, what everyone will need data for, and keeping that database sort of accurate and up to date. And then as you progress kind of up the pyramid, you're getting to what sort of further advances you can get as you get more mature in sort of your data, the way you use data and your sort of data strategy. So moving into sort of meaningful reports, sort of help your key stakeholders understand the project, or as well if it's coming to change requests or change boards, that kind of thing, giving key insights to decision makers or stakeholders on what's happening and where your project is at. And then moving up from that, it can really drive your actions or your decision making to really optimize the delivery of your project. So whether that's to do with sort of budgets, or your resources, or sort of what results you deliver, sort of what to target as part of your project. under actions, and well, I've sort of drifted into the next one, sorry, results as well. Sort of monitoring as well what your impact and your results, what you're delivering. And throughout the whole journey there, that whole piece, that data can really sort of ensure you're taking the right options or the most efficient options throughout your project decisions. All right, so who does it help? I mean, yeah, here we've got a list of sort of stakeholders within a project, sort of project management, contractors, residents, senior management, cabinet, DESNES. So it really is sort of the whole picture. So ultimately, it can support everyone involved in any project, sort of that accurate and robust data sets. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to deliver is to improve those living standards for residents and help, make them warmer homes and also reduce the carbon. The carbon, sort of the amount of carbon we're emitting from these homes. And the smoother, I guess, the project is to deliver, it allows us more sort of energy to target new projects as well. So if we can sort of get that efficiency in that project management delivery, which I know is hard, but it's eventually the idea is to become, I guess, like a well-oiled machine and really work on that data side to allow us to sort of deliver more and deliver it more effectively. Okay. Yeah, so now one sort of for you all, what do you think any other reasons why data is really important in retrofit, or can anyone think of any other reasons on top of those? Also some examples where it's been really helpful for yourselves. I mean, I guess just thinking of a few that I've spoken to people in the past, really key ones when it comes to data as well, and it's sort of accuracy, I guess the big one is the big variety people tend to see, even let's say for retrofit assessments, even from the same contractor, but maybe different retrofit assessments, getting different levels of quality of data can be a challenge, or from well-known providers as that data accuracy and cleansing of the data is really key. Yeah, we've got one here. Good to have robust data about customers so that proactive approach is adopted to gain access. Yeah, that's a great one. That sort of knowledge of the residents. Yeah, that's a really good one. I failed to mention earlier. Yeah, and we see that time and time again is local knowledge or an understanding of the people living there, and that sort of early engagement to really get people on board with the project, residents on board. And yeah, informing models, definitely. Exactly. When, getting it into, let's say with your sort of maintenance schedule and aligning retrofit with that, or the, aligning different levels of works within your organization to at times potentially combine them, to combine maintenance and retrofit. And yeah, to pull out general trends and insights is definitely a really important bit as well. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Ooh. Occupation and frequency, yeah. Making the most of potentially if there are properties that are voids at that point in time as well. And timing the works can be, yeah, that's a really key bit, as well. And we've had sort of interesting stories as well with people potentially, if there are some voids, using those as sort of show homes, let's say, or showing what the project could look like, or what like a ventilation system feels like inside the home as well. This can give really valuable engagement, and as part of that sort of engagement strategy with the residents. Okay. Data principles, governance, and process. So, sort of touched on it a bit there, but I was just talking about kind of accuracy and completeness. But here's just some of the key aspects of data quality, I guess. Accuracy, completeness, that all data points are in there. Consistency, so this is one that's often challenging, is if maybe two sources of data do not align between, let's say, your EPC and your own asset management register, might be conflicting information between the two. Timeliness, really key, is having that data in an accurate form where you can use it quickly to make decisions or get insights. So it sort of needs to be maintained, and you can access it quickly to generate graphs or reports from it. Uniqueness, we're talking about duplicates again. We don't want any sort of duplicates in there. I think that often can happen with sort of EPC data, potentially two records for the same property. And validity, just that the data is valid, and that comes into sort of the cleansing process or sort of maintaining the data set, which sort of discuss a bit more here. So this is sort of a basic data process. First point is really identifying what data you need. So this could be for a longer term kind of strategy, let's say net zero strategy or a 10-year kind of asset strategy, pulling in whatever data sources you think might be useful or that you have available to you. And that's at an early stage can be really helpful, because there might be things that you need to analyze which at first you're not sure on. But if you have as much good data in there as possible, that's sort of ideal. So then exactly, sourcing your data. So our own asset management data, so open source data, seeing what other sort of pieces we can pull in. There's a slide on it in a minute as well, and what sort of data sources you could include, then collating that into one database and then cleansing it. And that's sort of cleansing and maintenance is part of that as well, and maintaining it as it grows and as you use it over time. Analyzing the data, so drawing some analysis from it and thinking about sort of those trends or what you're seeing there, and then choosing your project. So from that, what are the most suitable project homes for my next project? Let's say that we want to deliver in the next 12 months. What are our aims? What have we done in the past, and where are we aiming to go with this next phase of works? So a bit more on cleansing the data. So having that complete, valid, sort of accurate data that we can use in a timely manner, without duplicates, and that is consistent. So a classic one is that sort of conducting logic checks, or trying to find gaps in the data. Here's the example of data showing cavity walls for pre-1900 properties. So exactly, trying to find inconsistencies, things that don't make sense, essentially, that don't seem realistic. And then again, conducting consistency checks. Good example here of looking at one block. Are the data points the same for each flat, let's say, within that block, or do they not align? That doesn't really make sense. Or even on a street level, I've seen people say the street, all the properties were constructed at the same time, and some of them say they're cavity, some of them say they're solid wall, or inconsistencies kind of in that data at a street level as well. And then the duplicates of, as we discussed, potential multiple entries for the same property. Could be that one's an old one, but it wasn't removed when an updated record was created. And finally, sort of plausibility checks for those. Let's say you could have some outliers, like very, very high, very low SAP scores, unusual heating types, things that don't quite fit in, data points that don't quite make sense, or you wouldn't expect to see in that data set. And so next, collating it. So once you have your different sources, what was available to you and what you've been able to get through public sources or maybe paid for sources, ideally we want to keep sort of one database, one source of truth. We don't want to be keeping it in multiple locations where it has to be maintained. People have to remember to maintain it. Ideally, we want to have one database, sort of easily accessible, that we can maintain as things are updated, and the whole team would have to then be working off that, or drawing at least off of other registers. Let's say if you have an asset management team, drawing information directly from their database if they're not able to use your database. So connecting the two essentially. And just ensure you're creating backups. And we've already mentioned a few of these, that planned maintenance or asset renewal, along with EPC data, and sort of demographics or IMD data could be helpful. And as there was a comment earlier about gaining access, any sort of intelligence or information on the people there, and if knowing that, let's say we want to make sure we engage with this block early, or this individual, or make sure they're comfortable with the project and know exactly what's going on, that kind of thing. So that information is really helpful. That sort of what's in people's personal knowledge within the team. So what data do I need? So here's a big list of all sorts of buildings data. A lot of those data points will be within the SAP data set. But in addition to your sort of building characteristics, which are a lot of them will be in the SAP data, we've also got sort of planned works data, D&O data, whether it's heritage property or not, or it could be conservation area and that kind of thing. And then socioeconomic data, IMD or income benefits, any other information you might have on the individuals living there that could be helpful for making sure you're sort of targeting works in the correct homes, people who need it most, or whatever your sort of aims are of that exact project at that time as part of your strategy. And I think that's really key, is to pull it into your kind of overarching retrofit strategy, and try and build it sort of over a longer period, so phases all aligning to kind of your overarching strategy. Okay. So here it's sort of, as we discussed, some different sources. We've got open source data, EPC, IMD, conservation area, listed heritage, that kind of thing, or the DNOs as well. And then internal departments. I think this is a really key one, that sort of always hear people finding new things from different departments, whether it could be the ones you'd expect, sort of like asset management, planned works, those kinds of teams, but even some recently sort of from, let's say, building control, or other teams within your organisation, if it's a local authority, which can sort of planning department, that kind of thing, can potentially be helpful to see what else is going on. Building control was one that someone sort of shared with me recently, that they were trying to utilise that to see sort of what exactly was, to align it with EPCs or any other data, asset data they had on certain properties in an area. Paid for data, so stock condition surveys, having your own surveys done as well. Census data, sort of on the people living in the homes. And lastly, as we've discussed, that local knowledge that sort of is within your team, the people's knowledge working in the organisation. And potentially from other teams, could be complaints or sort of engagement knowledge from the people living in that area, that block or that property. So I mean, we recommend a really good starting point, baseline information is, that SAP, RD SAP data gives a good starting point, because that pulls in a lot of the property data, building data that we sort of discussed earlier. But I'd say asset management data as well, anything that you have in your own systems, your own sort of knowledge on top of that. SAP data can build that really good foundation for that first starting point. And it depends on your own experience as well. I know a lot of local authorities feel, they've maybe started on that in the past, but they had quite a few gaps, and they've sort of built upon that from their own learning of, which sort of areas did that not work that well, or what data were we struggling a bit with accuracy, to kind of put the steps in place to improve that, whether that's taking sort of some spot surveys, retrofit assessments, to implement, to support that, or to have some spot checks, that kind of thing. And then, on top of that, we've got sort of some performance data, sort of fuel bills or energy consumption, if that's available to you, or stock attribute profiling, if you have that, to kind of cross-check with your SAP data. All right, so if you've got sort of your housing data, let's say, of the properties themselves that look promising or look like you would want to target them, what are the sort of next things you want to look at as part of a retrofit plan? From my experience, really big ones are conservation, listed building data, and that planned work data that we've discussed. So pulling in your planned works with your retrofit works, that can be a really effective way to deliver the program. Also, because you're pulling in sort of experience from other places, and often, the residents have been waiting for that planned work for a long time, so they're really keen to get that completed, and pulling in the retrofit at the same time can be, a really good way of sort of piggybacking that off of there. Obviously, grant funding, if there is any, or what depends on the time you're delivering this, because this is more of a generic sort of data analysis strategy. Need to link that in, sort of what is suitable for that current phase. Heat network data can be useful if that's getting pulled in. That's obviously depends completely on the area and what's available. Supply chain and cost, what is deliverable under your budget at that point in time. And then, there is the tenant refusals. Now, I think access issues, it's definitely worth noting if there's been challenges in there in the past. And I think the key bit is, if there have been challenges, to really building that tenant engagement strategy, and from day one, trying to build that relationship and sell these works to them, essentially. And obviously, it becomes more challenging if there's sort of leaseholders compared to sort of social housing tenants. Need to look at the resourcing of that and how that's going to work. It depends obviously on the project and the sort of requirements of what you're delivering. So just quickly to touch on, there's a bunch of software solutions that can help you with this. I'm sure some of you will be using these at the moment, and they can be really helpful tools, especially to pull out sort of insights and start planning. Can even sort of start suggesting measures that would be suitable for the properties, can help you with those early stages of sort of decision making and putting a project together. I guess the key bits are kind of highlighted. There's on the data governance, the decisions you can draw from them are sort of only as good as the data going into them. So it's that regular maintenance, quality and consistency for me are really key to get good insights out of any tool, really, whether that's your own or one of these sort of software solutions. And then if you've got that sort of maintained quality and consistent data set, these can be really, really powerful tools to help you put your projects together and start planning your next phase of retrofit. Okay, so going into stock assessment. So here, I hope you can see this, but it's just some screenshots of some examples of some analysis that sort of other projects have done. Here, they're obviously interested in seeing sort of their carbon emissions, different property types, sort of planning. I'm guessing some net zero planning was going on here. Looking, sort of putting some graphs together to start thinking about where could we save the most carbon, and then probably we're comparing that to costs and locations and just the other sort of asset management plans and planned works kind of strategy. But it's just an idea of sort of things you could start doing, looking at your different CO2 savings from, let's say from different measures or different tenures, or different property types. Yeah. I can try. Can I zoom in? You might be able to zoom in on your own. In your Teams, you should be able to zoom in the bottom left corner. If not, we'll be sharing the slides, so it might be easier. I don't think I can in this presenter mode. I can't see where I can zoom in. But we'll be sharing the slides, so it'll allow you to sort of look at them in more detail. Yeah, so yeah, stock assessment here, kind of similar. It's, again, apologies if it's a bit small, but this is, again, just trying to draw some insights. Sort of what SAP scores have we got, if we want to target E's and D's. There you can see that in this example, there's quite a few homes or properties in that kind of range. And it also gives some information on sort of fuel bills and carbon. So that sort of can be really interesting and useful for some decision making. Again, yeah, these are just some examples. Again here, so we can have wall construction, looking at targeting cavity walls or solid brick. Obviously, most common in this example. Yeah, similar to the other ones. And this again is some insights. Could start looking at location. So this is sort of really helpful for trying to avoid sort of pepper potting and trying to get a good grouping of homes that you want to target. There's all sorts you can do in mapping. You could do it using some of those software tools, or you can use QGIS or ArcGIS, those kinds of tools, to start looking at plotting them on maps. Even actually on Google, I think there is a mapping tool as well on Google where you can start doing it for sort of a low number of data points. And yeah, looking at sort of where it could get to targeting. So I believe here it was looking at sort of a pre and post graph of where originally the properties were and what sort of improvement can be made. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of a before SAP and an after SAP as an example kind of graphic that could be made. All right. So finally, just to discuss a bit on incremental retrofit. So this is sort of fitting in your retrofit plan, but maybe looking at it as more of a longer term strategy, fitting in with, let's say, net zero targets or just general any decarbonisation targets and timelines that you might have, whether it's sort of 2035, like a shorter term one, or 2040, 2050, something like that. So here's kind of an example of a phased approach. In this example, there's sort of a phase one of sort of fabric works, and then decarbonising heat, and then sort of renewables and solar thermal as well. And how that can sort of reduce the fuel bills and carbon emissions for this example. But that's sort of just giving a flavour of what you can do and how the visuals could look. And you can, there's lots of different ways you could do this. But it's just sort of interesting insights that you get out of these data sets. And to summarise, yeah, so looking at the column on the left, so the key bit is that pulling some data sets in that you think will be helpful as a starting point and cleansing that data, whether that's sort of trying to find any issues or things that don't quite make sense, and consolidating that into sort of a single source of truth to work from going forward for the team. And then from that, sort of can do different modeling, whether that's developing a baseline or creating some initial property lists you want to target, and maybe the measures that you want to put in them. Sort of in that's part of the retrofit analysis, sort of looking at potential benefit and what looks deliverable within your own plans for the next wave of delivery, and sort of feeding into implementation. So what actually delivery phase, going out to do assessments, how accurate was our data, and that can then actually feed back into the data set. Once we've got retrofit assessments and pulling new data into the model, that allows you then to go into, I guess, the final step, the improving the model. So it can be retrofit assessments, but also on completion. There's a lot of information and learning that can go back into it. And then as you're delivering multiple phases, the idea is that it would develop and improve over time, giving you a really valuable product that only gets better as time goes on. And as part of that, so moving on to the right column, just that's, I guess, quality assurance is that a key bit that will just keep that maintenance, I guess, going to make sure it's sort of a really valuable product. And finally, kind of that objective setting. That was kind of feeding into what I was trying to say earlier, is that long-term objectives. I think that's where it really starts working over a longer period of time, not just for one sort of delivery phase, but over a longer period, if it aligns with your net zero strategies or longer term asset strategies, can become like a really valuable tool over time for any decision making kind of related to your assets. That's it. Got some time for any questions.